Hello comic fans, here's Earl Grey, and it's due time to finish my annual countdown for 2022's output of comics, graphic novels, comic books, collected editions and whatnot. I take no responsibilities if you're offended because I forgot your favorite titles, but let me know about your standout titles, the books that you liked the most. And on to rank 10, the deluxe black and white edition of the Incal by Möbius and Jodorowsky, published by Humanoids. I did a video about this one, and the opinions in the comments were extremely torn between cash grab and essential book. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. In my opinion, this is the most essential cash grab of the last year. If you're familiar with the Incal, and you should be, you know how important the colors are for the story. Not only in terms of beauty and atmosphere, but very often because of the information they convey. Möbius draws very often only the outlines for the color, so it's hard, if not impossible, to really appreciate the Incal just in black and white. On the other hand, a lot of the pages in this deluxe hardcover really shine in black and white and give us a fresh and different view on this European classic. Overall, it's a wonderful book and opportunity to focus on Möbius' precise and efficient line work. But if you're new to the Incal, you should get a colored version first. For an example, the beautiful looking slipcase edition from Humanoids. On rank 9, I put Joseph Smith and the Mormones by Noah Van Sciver, published by Abrams Comic Arts. I was a bit afraid to purchase this book because of the subject matter. Religion is not really something I care too much for, and even less for a rather off-wall religious faction like the Mormons. So needless to say that the one and only draw for me was the creator Noah Van Sciver, and the understanding that this has been very personal to him, almost a catharsis, or at least coming to terms with his very own history, since he was brought up in a Mormon family. So, this beautiful book in all its deliberately old-fashioned design arrived, and I read the more than 400 pages in one sitting. Now that I said this, I feel almost guilty in gobbling up Noah's work of years and years in just one day, but it's just an excellent, excellent book. It's historically accurate, at least as far as I can tell. It's gripping, it's funny, very entertaining overall. Noah Van Sciver treats Joseph Smith and his companions with the necessary respect, so the comic never borders on satire, even if it must have been tempting to make fun of them. Instead, Noah decided to stay true to the written records and sources about the life and times of Mr. Smith, almost clinically ripping apart all his mystical revelations and all the gobbledygook. Without saying or drawing this directly, the comic makes it very clear that Joseph Smith was not much more than a talented trickster. Scratch that word, talented. He was just a trickster who has the luck to live in a time in which people were very eager to believe and followed a self-acclaimed prophet if he only was cheeky and convincing enough. Maybe he even believed himself, who knows, as the best lies are usually the ones that we believe ourselves. But it's by far not only a story about the beginnings of a religion, but an epos about an important part of American history. Just for an example, Joseph Smith was, spoilers, the first presidential candidate who was murdered during the election campaign in the US. On rank 8, there's L'état morbide, written, drawn and colored by the Belgian Daniel Hullet. Originally published as a 3-part album series, end of the 80s, beginning 90s, it's now collected in one nice hardcover by Splitter. There's this cynical comic creator who moves into a strange house in Brussels because he hopes It conveys enough inspiration for his newest comic, and he gets more than enough of it. Since the actual central character is the house and all the mysterious persons that live there, or are they even alive? Great atmosphere, great storytelling with the right dose of unnerving, uneery vibes and great side characters. Most and foremost, the girlfriend of the cartoonist. Modern horror is very difficult to do, but here it's achieved perfectly. The story will have you at the edge of your seat. Did I say modern? Well, despite being around 30 years old, the story hasn't aged at all, I think. Could be put out by any hard-edge indie publisher as a new story, I feel. On 7, there's Echolands by J.H. Williams III. Another one I did a video about previously, discussing and showing the book in more detail. This is first and foremost an art spectacle, a controlled explosion of creativity and craftsmanship. No one uses more styles and skill in just one panel than Mr. Williams, mimicking and emulating other cartoonists, and mixing it all up so that it all becomes something of his very own. The story is so far a bringing the group together episodic adventure that gets my hopes real high for the rest of the hopefully long-lasting epos. Let's continue with 6, and it's the work of a German cartoonist, the third crowd in my list if I counted correctly. Jens Harder, continuing his remarkable project, the comic about everything since the Big Bang, with Better Civilizations Volume 2, despite of its title actually being the third volume in that series. This is the German version by Carlsen. There are similar looking books available in French, and there was even an English version of the first volume called Alpha by the publisher Knockabout, but that may have been in softcover and probably smaller, I don't know. If you ask me, I would buy these books even in Hindu or Chinese, since they are practically silent books. There are comments here and there and an afterword, but other than that, Jens Harder's work is all about purely visual storytelling. The two preceding volumes covered the time from the Big Bang until 0 AD, so now we become a stunning summary of the bimillenary plus since then. There will be a fourth volume, which will take a deep look into the future. A long time ago I made a video about Jens Harder's project, so I'm very glad that we got now the continuation. One may say that this is not a real comic, but it is. It's our story and the story of the universe told in fast motion and in meticulous detail. It's an alternative history book as well, not dwelling in stiff stereotyped thinking, but using pop cultural references like comics, movie posters, LP cover art, etc., where it makes sense. It's definitely not a book that you can read in one sitting, but certainly one that you will open up again and again for enjoyment and inspiration. These books are marvelously made with metallic shining inks and just a pure joy. Now to something DC. On 5 is the best I read from DC for a long time. Catwoman, Lonely City. Written, drawn, colored and lettered by Cliff Chiang. Published in DC's Black Label line. Since his Wonder Woman run with Azzarello, I adore Cliff Chiang's art, as I did in Paper Girls, so this was a no-brainer for me. But it turned out to be so much better, even than what I expected. This comic creates a fantastic, in the borders of the setting, realistic, well-rounded future Gotham with an incredible Selina Kyle. I guess it's very difficult to show elderly superheroes, but Chiang does this in a so elegant and matter-of-fact way that it leaves my jaws open, and fell deeply in love with this version of Catwoman. Which should be canon. What's all with this Elseworlds BS? Here you have a perfect story with wonderful interactions between the future versions of the characters. This Killer Croc is my favorite Croc ever. And don't let me get started about the rest of the bunch. Old Penguin and the Riddler, of course. If you ask yourself, what's with the Batman? Well, he's dead. And you already should know my favorite Bat book of 2022. But in regard of Catwoman, Lonely City, the only flaw that I could see is that it is already over after only 4 oversized issues. Back to old Europe with rank 4 and continuing with old and aged characters. Old like the old geezers, or in German die alten Knacker, or in the French original les vieux fourneaux. The 7th album came out recently, and after the previous one, which was still good but a bit weaker, well, this new album Lupano and Kawe are true back to form. This German translation is published by Splitter. The English translations put out by Ablaze are way behind. At least I could only find the first 2 albums so far. But you should organize public turmoil to get the stuff in English complete and pronto, because this story had me again crying and then laughing in tears just within some panels. It's intelligent, human, emotional, insightful, timely, and incredibly funny, without aiming to be funny all the time, if you know what I mean. Our gang of geezers and families and friends and enemies is back in the village of Moncoeur, celebrating the picnic of friendship and togetherness. And as you may already suspect, it will not end that friendly and together as planned. The characters are again very precisely portrayed. Their body language and their facial expressions are absolutely on point. They are, despite and because of all their flaws, so likable and relatable. This comic tells more about humans and human interactions than tons of newspapers, and it tells it in a much more friendly way. Comics like the old geezers give me hope that maybe there's a chance for us, and maybe the next picnic of friendship and togetherness will maybe even a success. On 3, I cheat a bit, since Tangs by Anders Nielsen is fortunately far from being finished. There are 5 beautiful issues out so far, each of them almost 60 pages in a roundabout European album size, printed on sturdy, almost cardboard-like paper. I could ramble about the production qualities alone for hours. This is Anders Nielsen at the top of his game. Artistically and in terms of storytelling, it's a huge jump. I mean, I love Dogs and Water and Big Questions, no doubt about it, but it all pales in comparison to the dense yet airy, intricate yet atmospheric, beautiful and gripping, loving and brutal, metaphysical and timely storytelling and art that you'll find here. We are still in the kinda post-apocalyptic world of Big Questions and Dogs and Water. In fact, the central character in the latter one, the boy with the teddy bear knapsack, is a part of the Tangs world as well. In hindsight, the preceding books seem almost like a sketch for Tangs. Another character is Prometheus. You know, the guy who rooted with the humans and got rightfully punished for it. So this comic is a meditation about humanity and about many things. And a great story with distinctive characters, told in unusual, experimental, but easily readable ways. Just read it. It's a bit of a pain that Tangs is very hard to get over here. I got the first 3 through Mansion Press in France, but the following issues you only can get through Anders Nielsen's website with steep postage. By the way, questioning humanity and the question if we deserve a future at all seems to be a red thread through many of the titles on my list, I just realize. But that's somehow not a surprise after a year like the last one, I guess. On 2, there's a drumroll manga, and one that's actually more than 10 years old by now. But the German translation came out just 2022. I'm talking about Sunny, Volume 5 and the concluding Volume 6, published by Carlsen in 2022. I did a video about Taiyo Matsumoto's mangas in which I spoke about Sunny in more detail. But to keep it short here, this comic is overwhelming. It's incredibly touching and emotional. Thinking of some characters and scenes in Sunny makes me shiver. Literally, the title giving Sunny is an old and defunct Nissan Sunny parked at the front of a home for unwanted children. There are some orphans amongst them, but mostly they are kids whose parents could not or did not want to care about them. So we follow these kids and their caregivers through their everyday lives and struggles. Almost unnecessary to say that the stories are not always happy-go-lucky stories, but the inevitable sadness is balanced out with humor, with the friendship between the characters, with their affection for each other. There's no kitsch here, just true, poignant observations. That it's impossible to stay through these books with dry eyes is a different story. Taiyo Matsumoto had to spend his childhood in a similar children's home, so no wonder that the observations in this manga feel so real and true. And as I said it before in my other video, for me, Sunny is the key to Taiyo Matsumoto's other comics, like Tekken Concrete. Okay, now to rank 1, and for me, like for many others, I got the impression there could only be one book, one man, one collected edition. Darwin Cook Late, with his Parker adaptations in the wonderful Martini Edition Volume 2, aptly titled Last Call. It collects the score and the Slayground, just Slayground, and one short story by Brubaker and Phillips, which can't be a substitute for a third story by Darwin. And it doesn't aim to be. What can I tell you that I haven't told you in my video about The Last Call? The two Parker stories are crime noir at its best. The additional material with interviews and so on is very touching. The edition with slipcase is beautiful. I'm still a bit upset about the German edition. They call a severely shrunken version also Martini Edition. In my opinion, that's cheeky and dishonest. Just call it deluxe or whatever, but don't suggest that it's something close to this beauty here. Nevertheless, if you haven't got the first Martini Edition, I mean the English one, start there. It's still a slightly better book, even slightly better book. If not for another reason than just because it contains 3 instead of only 2 Parker stories by Darwin Cook. Anyhow, 2022 was a great year for comics, which gave us a lot to be thankful for. And I thank you for listening and watching. Goodbye.